Hey everyone, welcome back to the second episode of Verizon Connect Training. In today's session, we're going to try to cover everything that you need to know about markers. In specific, we're going to go over how to create a brand new marker, as well as editing existing markers should we need to. And let's go ahead and get into the goals of this training. In particular, the first thing we want to do is highlight and distinguish the method that we want you guys to be creating your markers. In specific, and we touched on this a little bit in the introductory lesson, we want to be using this tool called scenarios. Scenarios is a way for us to get into a sandbox environment, but it's also a way for us to push new data into the databases within Verizon. So the reason we want to use scenarios is that when we go through the process of creating a marker in scenario, it offers us the ability to edit the marker ID field. And that is a field that we want to be setting to be our account number. And in that way, it ensures that every account or marker is represented by a unique account number. This helps prevent duplicates from occurring. And as you'll see in a later training session, it's going to make our creation of recurring jobs much easier and smoother. So that's why we want to be using scenarios, and that's what we're going to show you all today. The second point we want to bring across in terms of markers is how Verizon geocodes these addresses. So you'll see in the examples that we go through, we'll be entering in the street addresses that you are all familiar with. And that is something called an envelope address. But what you'll find out is that while Verizon will accept those street addresses, what it actually then does is it tries to geocode those addresses to a latitude and longitude value. And that is ultimately how it routes the couriers, is using latitude and longitude, not necessarily using the street address that we put in. So you'll see some of the nuances with that. And in specific, you'll see some of the challenges we might encounter if we're trying to add in an address with, say, a suite number. Because sometimes Verizon, with the addition of a suite number, it won't return a latitude and longitude for us. So we'll show you all how you can work around that issue today. And the second thing that we want to then show is after we had created a new marker or a fresh account, we'll show you how you can edit and update those markers should things such as the account moving ever occur. And we'll do that in the marker table within the UI itself. So those are the big goals for the training session in today. And just to recap and reiterate what we covered in the last session, marker is just the physical location for an account. Within the marker, there is no information with regards to pickup windows or pickup frequencies. It's simply just where is this account located? And as we just talked about, Verizon geocodes every address we give it to latitude and longitude values. And now we'll get into how to create a marker, and in specific, how to use scenarios to create a marker. And earlier we talked a little bit about this concept of a marker ID. And in this slide here, you can see what we're talking about in terms of setting the marker ID to be the account number. So in this top screenshot here, you can see we're creating an account called AL123. And within scenarios, we are able to set the marker ID to be the account number. This is an editable field in scenarios. But if we were to try to create a marker elsewhere, such as within the UI or within dispatch, the system won't allow us to edit the marker ID or to set it. And instead, it's going to auto-generate this big sequence of numbers and letters for us. And that can result in duplicates being made. And it's also going to make our lives a little bit more challenging when we're creating recurring jobs, which are building and based off of these marker IDs. So now that we got those out of the way, let's go ahead and let's hop into the UI and let's go ahead and try to add a marker through a scenario. So I'm here in Verizon, and where I want to go ahead and navigate to, if I haven't favorited my scenarios, is underneath jobs and routes. I can click onto that drop down to the left side, and I can click into scenarios. And once that loads up, the first thing I want to do is click onto this blue button to enter into my scenario. Now, scenarios, again, is a sandbox environment where we can play around with things. We can make routes. We can also create markers, as you're about to see. And when you click on Create Scenario, it gives you the option to have the data being pulled from the database in Verizon. And that's the option we're going to be wanting to be choosing. It's this first one to the very left. So I'm going to create a scenario using all the data I have within Verizon. Next up, it's going to ask me what territory I want to be working in. So for us, we're going to go ahead and play around with Northern California. I can click down into this territory, and I need to add a marker to Northern California. It's a new account that a courier will start picking up at within the week. So we need to get that into the system. So I'll go ahead and I'll click into Northern California. And next up, it's going to ask me for the date range that I want to be working in my scenario. And what we recommend you guys using is selecting a date range into the far future. So today is March 30th, and so it's automatically set to that date. What we would recommend you doing is selecting something far in the future, such as 3 to 4 weeks out in advance. And this ensures that when you're pulling the data that far ahead, you're not going to be accidentally affecting anything that's currently happening in dispatch. And I'll show you what I mean by that in this example. So let's say I go ahead and select a date into the far future. I'll select Monday, April 25th, and I'll go ahead and create my scenario. And what you'll see when this loads up is you'll see an empty scenario. You won't see jobs and routes populated for the day. So now I'm in my scenario environment, and sure enough, when I click OK to exit out of this view, you'll see that I have 0 jobs published for the day and 0 routes active for the day. And that makes sense because we're so far in the future, we don't have any routes up and running yet for that date. Now let's head back and let's show you what happens if I select a date that does have a dispatch environment published. So again, we're here today, we're in March 30th, and if I was to create a scenario, you'll actually see jobs and routes populate because our couriers are currently using the system and they're live. And sure enough, once that loads, you'll see that I have my routes down here at the very bottom, and they're active routes. The couriers are currently on their routes as we speak. If I change my job setting to all, you'll also see that these are the jobs. We have 161 pickups for today that are on a courier's route. So what could happen is if you select today's date, you could accidentally delete certain stops or certain routes, and that will end up affecting dispatch once we publish. So that's why, just to be safe, when we're going to make additions such as markers, we just want to go ahead and select a date in the future where there are no routes and jobs currently being serviced. So we'll go ahead and we'll do that. We'll select April 25th, and this is what we can call a blank fresh scenario. Awesome. So I'm in my scenario here, and what we're going to try to do now is we're going to add a marker. So what you want to do, if this is a fresh new marker and it doesn't currently exist, you can go ahead and go into this drop down here, and you can select into the markers view. So we're in the jobs panel to the top left, and it's naturally set to jobs. And what we can do is we can set it to markers. And as you can see here, I've got 143 markers in my system currently, and I'm looking to add a brand new one. So with the marker drop down selected, and the marker table revealed, I can go ahead and add my new marker using this create marker button. And that's just the plus button here. So once I click into that, you can see this is the marker ID field now, which is something that we can enter in within scenarios. So in this new marker, we're just going to go ahead and say it is AB124, brand new account. And what we always recommend you doing is setting the marker ID to being the account number. So once that's done, the next thing is to set the marker name. And what we want you guys to have for that is the account number followed by an underscore, followed by the account name. So in this case, we'll just go ahead and say test as the account name. So now with the marker ID and name set, the next thing we'll want to do is go ahead and search up the address. And we'll search up the address, and Verizon will then geocode this address and return a latitude and longitude value down in this location drop down. So here, this address that we're going to use is 2125 South Winchester. And I'll type in a couple of characters, and it may not load immediately. So what we'll do is we'll give it more information. So on top of the street address, we'll then give it the city. And we'll also give it the state. And sure enough, once I give it those pieces of information, you'll see that an address is populated at the bottom. And I want to click into that. And now Verizon, once I had selected that address, returned this latitude and longitude value to me. And this is the value that is what's routing the couriers to. So they're referencing this latitude and longitude value in order to route the couriers. Now let's say in this particular example, I forgot, oh, there's actually a suite number associated with this account, which is kind of important for pickups that may be in hospital buildings or big industrial complexes. So I can go ahead and wipe this out, and I'll clear out my latitude and longitude values, and I'll go ahead and type in the address again. And you'll see something that's kind of interesting with suite numbers. So go ahead and I'll go 2125 South Winchester. And then this suite number is suite 130. And it's still in Campbell. And what you'll see is that Verizon, again, it gave me an address. It spit back the street address, but it doesn't read the suite numbers very well. And it actually, in the majority of the times, if you provide a suite number in this field, it won't return an address for you to select on. So what you'll need to do then is you'll just go ahead and you'll remove the suite number, and we can add that back later. So clearing those out, I'll go ahead and select this address again. And now it provided me the latitude and longitude. And once that's in there, I can go ahead and then click back into my address field and then add in my suite number. And it's still going to be referencing that latitude and longitude to the street address, but now we just included the suite number as well, so the couriers can have the full picture when they're seeing this on their phone. Because even though Verizon routes you based on the latitude and longitude, what the couriers and the dispatchers will be seeing is the street address up here, which is called the envelope address. So within their app now, they've got the complete information. So now we've got the marker ID, we've set it to the account number, we've set our account number and the account name, in addition to putting in all of the street address information. The next thing that we could do is edit the categories. We can set these to be customers or HQs. Currently in this system, we cannot do that. That's something that will be added later. But in the future, you can set these accounts to be HQs, hubs, transfer locations, or just regular customers. Likewise, I can go down here into my notes panel and I can type any special notes in here. So for this account, we can say it's a lockbox that's located in the back alley. Something like that. Any notes that you need that relate to the pickup at this account can be entered in here. So I'll go back, I'll double check all of my information, and I'll save it. This looks good to me, so I'm going to go ahead and save it. And now in my markers field, I can simply search for it if I need to, just to verify that it is in there as well. And sure enough, when I type in AB12, it brings up AB124 test, and my markers is in the system. But now I'm not quite done yet. So while the marker is currently here in my scenario, I need to push this data back out into my data tables. And I can do so by publishing this scenario. So this is a way that we're going to update our database now. So I'm going to head up here above the map panel, and right above the map, you'll see a sync button. And once I click into that button, what I want to do is I want to publish this scenario to Verizon. And that's going to bring in this new data that I added in, which was the account AB124. So I'll go ahead and click into publish. And I'm going to verify that I would like to make these changes. And we're going to give it a couple seconds for that to load and push through. And there it is. So now we're all done with our publishing. You can see that because it's grayed out here and it was just published a few seconds ago. And now I can exit out of my scenario and just double check my work within the markers table. So to exit out of scenarios, you can click the back button here to return to your scenario list. It will ask you to keep it if you want to. In this case, since we just made one minor addition, we don't need to keep it. So I'm going to go ahead and discard my scenario, and I can leave the scenarios tab. Now, that was in scenarios, and we're going to check if that data was added in both dispatch and within our markers UI. So the markers table is located underneath the main panel here. And when I click into there, the first thing you'll want to do is you'll see this selection to the left side of the menu where you can filter your territories. And we want to be searching up this account in Northern California, and we've got that selected. And that brings up another point. Each marker that you're adding, because we were adding it through scenarios where we selected a territory, it's going to go into the territory that you selected at the very beginning of your scenario. So I'm here in Northern California, and I can search for my specific marker, which was AB124, and there it is. It's within my markers UI. When I click into it, you can see it's got the correct address, and it's also got the latitude and longitude as well down here. Likewise, if I go into dispatch now, I'll open up dispatch and I'll go ahead and select into my territory. And if I was to say make an on-call for that account, I'm in Northern California and I can simply search up the account in this location field. So now when I type in AB124, sure enough, we have that marker. The dispatch can now pull from the data we just added, and the marker exists. So I'm just going to go ahead and exit out of this, and I'll go back into the markers UI because I did notice one thing. When I'm in the markers UI now, you see that address? It still didn't have the suite number within it. So even though we did try to add it into scenarios, we're not seeing it here in the marker table. And as a result, our dispatchers and couriers won't see it. So another way we can edit the suite number is to go into the markers UI here, search up the account, and then click in the address field. Now, once we click into there, we can choose to edit this address. And when we open that up, sure enough, you see that there's a column for the unit number. And here is where we can type in suite. So now once I save it, you'll now see that the suite number is there as well. So this is another way you can validate your data as you're going through this. Once you had published it through scenarios, double check it in the markers table and make sure that the suite number is in there. And if it's not, you can go ahead and add it through this address line. So now let's say that, hey, this account, we added it in, but then sales notifies us that, oh, they actually moved locations. We gave you an old location. How are we going to update this address? The first thing that you might be thinking about doing is within this markers table, since we just showed you how to add the suite number, you could edit the address here. Whoop, I clicked something wrong, so I'll go back. You can click on the edit button and you can update these addresses. So let's say we're updating the addresses now. And in this particular case, there is no new suite number, but there is a new address in the street. So it's going to be 700. And the street name itself is going to be West Hamilton Avenue. This number here is going to be the street number. This street line will be the name on it. And then the city is still going to be within Campbell. Still the same zip code, county, city, and state. And again, no suite number. So we'll go ahead and we'll save it. And you'll see that it updated this envelope address, which is what the couriers and dispatchers are seeing. But you'll notice something else is when I scroll up, you'll see that my map didn't move. So while I did change the street address here, and this is what the team is going to be seeing, what's actually happening is that behind the scenes, Verizon's still geocoding and routing the courier to the old location. And that's because this is still referencing the old latitude and longitude value at the very bottom here. So let me go ahead and click back into there. And scrolling down, you can see the latitude and longitude values were still the same. They didn't update. And just for you to know even further, when you look at the map view, it's got the same exact view of the map from the old address. So what you're not done editing the marker just yet. What you'll need to do next is you'll have to update the latitude and longitude values. And we can do that through view or edit on map. So that's going to be right here underneath the map. I'll go ahead and click into that. And what you'll need to do is you'll have to use Google Maps in order to get the latitude and longitude values. So here we go. This is a better example. You can see now it's still geocoding to the old address, which was on Winchester, but this new address we gave it should be on Hamilton. So now we have to give it new latitude and longitude values. And in order to do that, we'll have to click into this shape option here. So that's just going to be right here. And then from here, you see we have the ability to edit the latitude and longitude. And just if you're not familiar with how to get latitude and longitude, what we recommend you using is Google Maps. So I'm just going to hop into Google Maps here, and I'm going to search up that new address for the account. 700 West Hamilton Avenue in Campbell, California. And now that brings up the map. And what you can then do in order to get the latitude and longitude is hover over the red balloon. You can then right click it, and here you'll see the latitude and longitude values. And when I click onto it, it copies it for me. And now when I head back into here, I can go ahead and insert these new coordinates in. So I'm going to click edit, and we'll make sure to clear out some of the old data, and we can click paste. Now we'll need to make sure that the second number is inserted into our longitude value. And then you'll see that when I did so, now with these new values, the green line indicates to us that the system is now moving the marker to this new address because it's always going to be using latitude and longitude. And so that looks right to us. We were originally at Winchester, and now this new account is going to be over at Hamilton. So we'll go ahead and we'll save these changes, and we can exit out of our map view. And sure enough, when I go back into my markers table, you'll see that we did move this account. The street address is up to date with the new address, as well as the latitude and longitude. And that's a key point to keep in mind, is that whatever changes you're making to the street address, you need to make sure you're also updating the latitude and longitude values. It's not an automatic process that will happen, so you'll have to do it within the markers UI whenever you need to make that change. So that was how we want you guys to be adding in markers. That's the essentials of markers. And just to recap what we covered today, we showed you how you could create a marker through the scenario feature. And we showed you how when you do that, you can set the marker ID to be the account number. And once you've done that, you can go ahead and check your work within the markers table, making sure that you're filtering by your territory, that you're searching up the correct account. And you can also verify that within dispatch as well by searching up your account. And there it is. And that's a key point to come back and touch to. Earlier, we talked about how you wanted to choose a scenario in the far future. So in our example, we chose a Monday in late April. And it didn't matter that we chose a date in the future. When we published the data and we brought it in, it still brought it in to our database in the current day. And again, we just selected a date in the future just to be safe and make sure that we're not accidentally affecting any routes that are currently going on within dispatch. So that's the basics of markers. The key thing to keep in mind is that whatever address update you need to have for the street address, you should also be making with the latitude and longitude as well. And in the next session, you'll see how we can build on this marker data in order to create recurring jobs, which are our routine pickup schedules. Thanks everyone for your time, and we'll talk soon.